times people will sit in that space and go, yeah, but, right? Yeah, but I still don't understand you. Yeah, but we're still different, right? We're still not able to communicate. We're still gonna, wow, you know what? That person is showing a really closed off heart. They're showing that they're not interested. And sadly, many of these people are in our churches. Okay? So bear in mind that you can be a change agent, and you can be the type of person that says, no, you know what? These are my tools. This is what I'm going to use. And I'm going to realize that we're both going to feel uncomfortable at some point or another. The problem arises when one person or a certain group of people feel more uncomfortable most of the time, as opposed to the majority of people in that organization, in that friend group, in that family, in that organization. So then we move to the middle, which is, you see 6 words there, right? Can you guys repeat these 6 words with me, please? I can't hear you very well, so I'm just going to ask that you say them out loud, and I will say them at the same time. But let's get some participation here. Ready? Frustration, misunderstanding,
Confusion,
tension, embarrassment, and aggression. Okay? So these 6 words, perhaps some of you have heard this already, and maybe some of you have not, but these 6 words are the 6 pillars of grief. And I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up, but I do want you to ask yourself this question. Do you have grief in your story? Has there been any kind of loss, whether it's resolved or unresolved? Has there been loss, right? I'm not only talking human loss, I'm talking job loss, I'm talking friend loss, I'm talking country loss, I'm talking community loss, and maybe there are some health issues that you're having. Maybe there's a loss of freedom, whatever it may be. Do you have some loss? Because grief usually comes from loss of some sort. And I have to admit that, since COVID started, many people think it's gone away, but anyways, since COVID started, there's been a lot of loss. And some of it has been unresolved. So in all honesty, just about everybody on this planet is experiencing one or more of these pillars of grief. So everyone in that room right now has some element of grief in their story, right? And so embrace that. But then when you're thinking about living cross-culturally, perhaps the person that you come in contact with who is different than you is carrying 3 or 4 of these layers of grief or pillars of grief. How do you think they're going to respond? How do you think you're going to respond when it comes to carrying grief, right? Lisa and I are not foreign to experiencing grief in our stories, pain, loss. We're only just a little bit older than all y'all, so we have a few more stories in our arsenal to deal with that. And so perhaps we've had to learn how to navigate that, but maybe some of you don't have the tools on how to navigate that. I strongly encourage you to understand what the grief is in your story and how best you might deal with it. When we think about the racial tensions in the country and what's been happening over the last several years, there's a lot of grief, how people are being treated, how they're not being treated, what are they being held accountable for when other people aren't being held accountable for the same things, right? Whether it's in their racial groups or not. There's a lot of tension, there's a lot of grief. So when we look at these 6 pillars of grief, here's what happens. It comes out in our communication, right? You meet someone who's different than you, and all of a sudden there's some level of frustration. Okay, so there's frustration. Maybe it's over communication. Maybe it's over the lack of understanding where that person is coming from. And so what are we going to do with that frustration? Are we going to let it simmer? I'm going to tell you right now, if you let frustration simmer, it will turn into misunderstanding. If you let that misunderstanding simmer, it will turn into confusion. And if I can take 1 second or a couple seconds, and Lisa, would you mind explaining to how we deal with confusion, since I can't use that terminology here right now? Do you remember?
No.
Who's the father of confusion?
Oh, Satan. You're saying evil?
Yes.
And
Yes.
yes. And
Yep.
the force is opposed to Christ? Is that what you're getting at?
Yep. If you can explain that little piece of what happens in the confusion.
I have no idea where you're going with this. I'm sorry, Kenny.
Okay. Who's the father of confusion, right? That's kind of where we're going with that. Just because I can't use that terminology here right now.
Yeah. So
Okay.
So, go ahead, just, I think we get it, I named it, and so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that's who the father of confusion is, then it's really important for us to partner with the one that is opposite to that, right? To dispel the confusion. And so we want to partner with, we want to partner with the Holy Spirit in that space, because the Holy Spirit is the only one that can shut down the father of confusion. And if we have confusion in our relationships, who's also being part of that, right? But the enemy. And so if you aren't already praying for these different relationships or the dynamic in these relationships, when you get to that point of feeling confused with the other person, shut it down with prayer. Shut it down by partnering with the Holy Spirit. Okay? Forgive me if I sound like I'm mumbling.
No,
This is a really
it's
intense
good.
country.
You could do you could do symbols like HS or.
There you go. Yes, thank you. So what happens often is people don't deal with the frustration with someone different than them. Then they don't deal with the misunderstandings, and they only get worse. They don't deal with them. Then there's confusion. I don't understand you. I just don't get you. I thought you were like this. I thought you were like that. Confusion sets in. If we don't deal with the confusion, we move into tension. Okay, I'm sorry. I hate tension when it comes to friendships, when it comes to any kinds of relationships. Very overwhelming. I hate it. We're not supposed to have them, right? And then there's embarrassment, because now we're saying things and doing things that are just not helpful in any shape or form, which eventually leads to aggression. And so when a relationship or a situation ends in aggression, we have basically partnered with the enemy to destroy that relationship, because it has no direction but down to go to broken relationships. And I don't believe that's what we were designed to experience in our story. I don't believe that we were designed or created to live in broken relationships. We were created to have deeper relationships, and as a result, we need to address what those pillars of grief are. So I want you to remember, what are the pillars of grief that are showing up in your story? Is there a lot of confusion? Is there a lot of struggle or misunderstanding with you and your peers, maybe your family members, maybe other folks in your community? And so here are some personal coping skills I really want you to work on, if you are not already. Observe, inquire, listen, and initiate. So Mary, can I pick on you for a second? Just put your hand up so I can see you, since I can't hear very well. Great, thank you. So Mary is new to the country, and she's from Ethiopia, and perhaps I don't fully understand her narrative, or maybe I haven't heard you speak a whole lot, so I'm not sure if you have a thicker accent, and if you do, maybe I'm not fully understanding some of the things you're saying. And so what I need to do is, instead of allowing frustration and misunderstanding to happen between Mary and I need to do a better job of observing. How is she handling? Is she struggling with some things? Maybe I want to inquire, which means maybe I want to ask her questions, not question her. There's a difference there. But ask her questions and say, hey, Mary, I noticed you were struggling in that situation. Is there something I can do to help you? Right? Or are you able to communicate with your professors clearly to what you need? If not, could I help you communicate that, right? Just to kind of help navigate some of those waters for her, if in fact I'm accurate with from her narrative. But then I also need to listen. I need to listen to what her needs are if I'm going to be an ally and stand with and support and kind of work with her in that space so that we can have a deeper relationship. But then I also need to initiate, right? Maybe Mary is, and I don't know, but maybe Mary is really nervous that she doesn't know how to maybe connect to a new person, because it's like, holy smokes, everything is new since moving here. And so maybe it's okay for me to initiate, say, hey, I know that there's been a lot of new things here. How can I help navigate some of these things? So what that's showing is that I'm implementing my personal coping skills, but then I'm also kind of sharing with her and teaching her how to use some of those same personal coping skills. And when I say the word listen, I want you to remember this. Listen has the same letters as silent. And so when we're listening, we need to be quiet, folks. When someone is actually sharing that, hey guys, it's really a tough struggle for me in this country, in this community, in this college, in this wherever, and I'm not speaking specifically about Mary, I'm just sharing that perspective. We need to listen. We need to pay attention. If we're not listening, then we're not being silent, and then we're not also being the best ally that we know we can be, all right? And I'm sure other folks appreciate that as well. So from that, once we've understood our coping skills, we move towards understanding empathy and a deepening of our relationships. But see, here's the thing. If we don't have personal coping skills, or if our personal coping skills are things like criticism, rationalization, and isolating of ourselves, we are successful in alienating somebody else, withdrawing or forcing them to withdraw, and having broken relationships. You know, when COVID hit, many of our communities were not set up for that lack of connection, right? And so they had to go online. And so a lot of the teaching had to be done online instead of within the context of our communities. I imagine you understand what I'm talking about. So when that happened, right, it's because we weren't practicing connection. And so there became alienation for a lot of people and withdrawal because they didn't know how to handle it. The folks that got put online didn't know how to handle it. The folks that were setting up these structures within our organizations were not putting proper things in place to help folks. They weren't listening, they weren't paying attention to say, what do our ethnic friends need in terms of connection? What do our elderly need? What do our sick folks need during this time? There was not a sense of understanding of what was going on, so we lost connection. Many churches imploded because of that, right? They lost a lot of their members. A lot of members have decided since COVID hit, I'm not going back, right? And so these became broken relationships even in that capacity. And so in many of those institutions, right, they weren't understanding the 6 pillars of grief. They weren't understanding what is needed in some of these other cultural groups or ethnic groups in order to help sustain deepened relationships during that time. And maybe you're one of those people. But just remember, this is what it means to live cross-culturally. Our organizations need to learn how to do it better. Our institutions that we're talking about specifically need to do better. Us as individuals need to learn to do better, even in our relationships. So when you know better, you do better. See why I love this cross-cultural living chart? What do you guys think? Any comments or questions or like aha moments? Was there a certain part of the chart that you really appreciate or heard in a different light?
Do you think, I really appreciated that you kept bringing up COVID, because I think I'm trying to repress those memories, but it's not a good idea, all right? So thinking about COVID, any thoughts about did you have some of these during COVID? I think that might be a good discussion starting point.
We jokingly said, well, we sold everything and relocated to another country. No, it wasn't because of that. That may have played, no, I'm just kidding, we digress.
Yeah. So
anybody?
During COVID, what was frustrating? Like what do you feel like you lost something?
I think I heard Van just say like communication and just not having that social interaction with other people.
Yeah.
Being isolated.
Okay.
Which can lead to some of these 6 pillars of grief. I never heard grief explained in this way, that kind of like one thing leads to another.
Mm-hmm.
It's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and when you think about like the racial tensions and the layers of grief, but you take it back a little bit more, the systemic racism that happens in the country, that's been for decades and decades and decades, right? Families have lost several family members over the years, either to racial violence or to COVID, right? Or even relocating to different countries. There's a loss, and they're so heavy, and if we don't face that stuff, then we're not going to maintain an emotionally healthy lifestyle or attitude or perspective in life. And then that just adds to becoming more of a shadow side. And I think if we start to understand how people are journeying through their own narratives, we might actually be a little bit more kind, a little bit more patient, and, you know, kind of be a little bit more, a little bit better at being vessels for JESUS.
Yes, I should have anticipated
I
that
can't
too.
spell.
Sorry,
Spell
Susan.
room, sorry.
I wish I could read your mind, but yes.
Oh my gosh. I should put it in the chat. Duh, I should put it in the chat.
Oh, Becoming best
It's all good.
Jesus.
Anyone else? Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to quickly share what part of this chart maybe jumped out at them? How did the part about appreciating cultural differences, like that level the playing field, how did that sit with anybody?
The cultural differences, this part.
Yeah, like how that levels the playing field, right? The oval.
Levels the playing field.
No?
No.
All right. Well, we'll move on. But I just want you to always remember that no matter what your attitude is coming into a situation, obviously it'll give you better results if you're in that open space. And yet, when you get to the pillars of grief, it could still go one way or the other, right? And so you want to make sure you're still staying vigilant around those things. But just remember, it does level the playing field. No one person who's different than you will have the upper hand just because of how that dynamic works.
Okay, so let me just, before you move on, I just want to connect this one more time to this whole class. Okay, so this class, Intercultural Communication, from day one, our goal has been, right, we said, to learn about cultural differences with the goal of communication in our marriages, like for her, right, interracial marriages, in our work settings, right, in our churches. And so this is just such a great sort of, the whole thing is helping us see how this happens. And what I hope that I've been modeling is coming at these interactions with other people with this openness, right? And working toward these skills of observing and inquiring and listening and initiating and hearing, trying to hear other people's stories, which is, they're going to include these things. Everyone on the planet, like Kenita said, will have been experiencing some of these pillars of grief. And that is, all of this levels the playing field. It makes us, I hope, willing and to inquire, to listen. And then we get to this place where our relationships are stronger at work and at church and here on campus, right? We have better understanding. We have deepening relationships. Thanks for letting me do that a minute, Kenita.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that worked. That was awesome. All right, so keep this somewhere where you can kind of refer to it, and you know, if you've made a few notes, just being mindful of your own process, all right? And then maybe even, I don't know how you guys do it in your class, but if you have like small group time or those kinds of things, or if you have someone that you can trust to kind of share some of this with, it'll help alleviate more of your grief at the same time. All right, so tell me, now I need some serious participation. What do you see in this picture? Go, just describe, throw descriptive words out.
I only had 3 people in my class last semester, and they came up with like 15 different things. So I know that you
Yeah,
each do just one thing or two. What do you notice? Just observation. This is observation skills 101.
Dining table?
The dining table. Yep.
Dining table, okay?
Plates.
Plates, chairs. Someone said.
Yeah, you might have to keep repeating them, Lisa, because I
Yeah,
can't quite
I
hear
will,
from where
I
they're
will.
sitting.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Prepare for food.
What was that, Ben?
That,
Say it again?
that prepare for food something.
I want to understand you. Say it again.
What is that?
I think you might have been talking about the picture like in the back.
The picture,
Yeah.
that, like, looks like a coffee pot?
What is that? Food or dinner?
Oh, there's preparation, it's preparing
Mm.
for something, like food is going to come. Good, very good,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, anything else?
Does Lance want to say that?
It appears to be all metal.
Good, good. It
Mhm.
seems like it's all
Yep.
metal. Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Anything else?
Go back around even. Go back around.
A date,
What?
date?
A date. Maybe it's a date.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
Haven't heard that one yet. That's
That's
awesome.
That's really, really good.
Yeah.
How many people?
I've been doing using this particular setup for over 8 years, maybe 9, and no one has said date.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Anything else?
There's 3 chairs, but only 2 sets of like plates and everything.
Yep, yep. Did anybody say anything about the no silverware?
Not yet. I was hoping.
Oh, no silverware?
Were you thinking it, or?
Yeah, I guess I just didn't notice, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. Those stools look awfully uncomfortable, don't you think?
Yes, they do.
Or maybe I'm aging myself and I always have back issues. Okay, all right, how about the tablecloth? Did anybody notice how wrinkly that tablecloth is?
Uh-huh.
Well, okay, so that's a lot of great visuals, what we're seeing here. And so let me just give you a little descriptor of this table. We talked about how the table is set. And sometimes the dishes that are on the table are Indian dishes that I brought back from India on one of my trips, way long time ago. And I put I set it up like that. Somebody had said the jug, not in this class, but the jug with the handle on facing the right side of the screen. Maybe the server is sitting in that stool. I thought that was interesting. When I did this that first time, the very first time, it was a last minute decision to grab that sheet out of the box because all the dishes were wrapped in that sheet. And I thought, oh, I don't like this table. Maybe I'll throw a tablecloth on it. So I quickly just shook it off and put it on the table and put the dishes on there. And there was a woman sitting in the group and she was just squirming, right? During this time where we're asking people to make observations, she is just squirming. Her face is getting beet red. And finally I'm like, you are trying to say something. Would you please tell me what you're trying to say? She's like, your wrinkly tablecloth is making me have seizures right now. She was so overwhelmed. And I just thought, I didn't care about that. And so then there's no silverware, right? Sometimes some people are going to feel uncomfortable. We served a lot of Indian food in our house. And we sometimes ate with our hands, and sometimes we ate with silverware. If we had guests come to our house, we would put silverware there, but we would say, you're welcome to eat with your hands if you'd like to try some of the cultural experiences that we would eat, how people eat in India. So the whole moral of this is a couple things. One, that sometimes some people will feel uncomfortable in a situation. Other times, some people will feel left out. Notice that third empty chair, and there's no place setting, right? Maybe the person's gonna come and then they're like, well, where's my food? How come I don't have any plates to eat from? And then even just looking at the kind of material that the dishes are made of, they're not microwave safe, right? So they're not convenient. And if they're not convenient, someone else might feel uncomfortable. And then there's the whole cultural piece, right? How do you eat out of these? What are these little bowls for? The bowls are actually called katoris. There's an actual name for it. They're little cups. They usually put salad or yogurt in them. And then the glasses are the drinking glasses. Maybe people don't know what to do with all of those items and they need to be explained. Again, some level of feeling uncomfortable. The concern is that many people, when they're invited to the table, feel uncomfortable all the time. That's not cool. It's okay that some people feel uncomfortable some of the time, but it's not okay that many people feel uncomfortable all the time. And that's kind of what's been happening in our institutions, right?
Churches.
Yep, thank you. And so when you think of that happening, where many people feel very uncomfortable all the time, something needs to change. We need to change how we're setting the table. We need to make sure that we acknowledge that, hey, some people are feeling uncomfortable. What can we do to make them feel comfortable? How can we change things around a little bit to make sure that more people feel more comfortable more of the time? Notice I didn't say all the time, because there are always going to be things that make people feel uncomfortable. So when we put this into context around culture, diversity, equity, inclusion, those kinds of terms, we've got to pay attention to how are we setting the table? Who is at the table? Who is the server? Who's in charge? Is there room for new people? Are there spots open? And then I think just to, again, refer to that particular institution that Lisa just said, that we always have, okay, no one's here. We always have Jesus at every conversation, at every table, at every meal. He's always present. And so are we treating people as though he were always present? Or are we saying, well, I'm going to be a jerk to you right now, and I'm going to be rude and disrespectful, right? We need to change our mindset. That when we set the table in terms of conversations, relationships, cross-culturally, we need to be mindful that he is always present in those conversations. And so are we representing well? Are we representing him? If we are people who have a relationship with him, are we being mindful of how we are representing him, even in our own relationships, in our cross-cultural relationships, in our communities, our neighborhoods, our workspaces, those kinds of things, right? So that's what this table is about. It's about how are you setting the table? Do people feel uncomfortable? And maybe you're thinking, well, I never have to set the table. I never have to do this kind of stuff because I'm always just a participant. Well, guess what? I have news for you. We are always setting the table based on our personality, based on our own personal story. The question is, do we have room in our lives for people different than us? That's where it starts, right? And if we don't, then we're saying we're setting the table for everyone to always feel uncomfortable. But if we say, I have room in my story for people different than me, no matter what other people say, then you're starting to reflect the one who created you. And that's what's absolutely most crucial when it comes to cross-cultural living and engaging with inclusion work and diversity work. I've been in far too many situations where people have given lip service to diversity. They celebrate diversity, right? As long as it's according to their agenda or their comfort level. But they've often given lip service to inclusion. And so what I'm saying is, in those situations, people have said, oh yeah, you're different. Oh yeah, that's great. But it becomes very subtle and then sometimes not so subtle when it comes to inclusion. It's like many people want their version of who you are, not your version of who you are. So remember we talked about the commonalities when with the Venn diagram? That's what we're talking about, that level of authenticity that we're allowed to offer. Any questions or comments or thoughts about the table setup? We've got just about another 5-10 minutes left in the class.
So going back to your Tuesday lecture, this is going from tolerance to inclusion. Like we might all
acceptance.
Like acceptance.
Yes.
We might all fit under a tolerance. But it's another thing to get to that acceptance.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? Even having moved here, there were a couple of scenarios. I won't go into too much detail about them, but there were a couple of scenarios where I just had the privilege and the honor to engage with a few people that were very different than me in a lot of areas, gender, religion, and a couple other areas. Anyways, I jumped at the idea to connect with these folks, and I was able to work with them and stay in healthy spaces with them. And honestly, by some fellow community folk, I was reprimanded. I was reprimanded because, oh, we don't do that here.
Okay, stop.
What don't you do here?
Okay, let me
Yep,
just
go
say-
ahead.
So you following, so church folks were telling her not to be so accepting and welcoming of people outside of the church community, I think is what she's trying to say here. Okay.
Yep. And then there were people that were in the church community, that some of these people that I was rubbing elbows with and trying to encourage, they really had a heart for what we're talking about, a heart for Jesus. And so I was nurturing that in our conversations, but because they had a propensity for different lifestyles, different choices, then I was to shun them, or correct them, or force them to be a certain way, and not be so diverse, but to assimilate. And it was really a tough several weeks of conversations, communication, prayer, and just working through some of that. And at the end of the day, I thought, you know what? I'm going to be held accountable for how I treated this person, period. And these people are different than me, and I'm going to be held accountable, right? It's not going to be my pastor or another congregant or another community member that's going to be held accountable for how I treat this person. And I'm not saying I have to fully agree with the lifestyle or the choices these folks were making, but I needed to learn to accept and be loving and extend grace, and keep pointing them to
Something greater.
Him.
JC.
Right?
JC.
Yep. Oh man, that's tough. Okay. So that's that. All right. So keep this picture in your mind, in your hearts, and the next time you set the table, practice some of these things that will help you live more authentically. All right, so basically promoting inclusion is an ongoing process. We call that non-closure. What that means is it's ongoing, right? You gotta keep learning, you gotta keep engaging, you gotta keep surrounding yourself with healthy, positive learning in this area, so you're making room for folks that are different than you. And watch for your shadow side. Because what's going to happen is you might have an interaction that doesn't go so great with someone who is different than you, but when you walk away, all they're going to remember is what they saw, and what they saw was maybe an angry person, an insecure person. And unfortunately, in their mind, it becomes all people like that ethnic background or that group of people is going to be like that, right? You're helping shape a negative bias in those people's minds. So that's the part that we're responsible for. We're not responsible for them living into that bias. We're responsible for, are we going to make that bias bigger and more grounded in their story, or are we going to correct it? I'm not saying that I have the corner on the market and I have to apologize for all the Indians on this planet, or that I have absolute understanding of every Indian nuance, right? And so that I become that token representative of that culture. But what I am saying is I am responsible for, in my story, my narrative of what kind of example I'm going to leave with that person. When we know full well, people will make up their minds. Remember the iceberg? People will make up their minds based on what they see and how you make them feel. So please, please, please keep working on your shadow side. And then more specifically, address any trauma in your story. If you identify that you have loss in your story and it's unresolved, that starts to take shape, that starts to take shape as trauma in your story. And if you actually have legit trauma in your story, and I'm one of those people that does, be mindful that some of this cultural, racial stuff just compounds on that, right? So keep working on your trauma. Take time to have conversations with people. I will make myself available to you via email if you have any questions on what does that really mean in terms of your specific narrative, so Lisa, feel free to give them my email address, or you all can, connect with me through my website at semaglobalconsulting.com. And there's a contact page. Feel free to drop me an email. I will keep it completely confidential, but I'll walk you through how trauma might be impacting your cultural nuances. And that would be as a way of blessing all y'all and just saying thank you and kind of helping you navigate some of this. Last but not least, we're getting to the end here. These are glasses, and if you, I don't think we have time to really make too many observations, but let me just quickly tell you, these glasses, they frame a perspective, pun intended. They frame a perspective, and if you look in the left side of the lens, you see the tall trees standing up there. In the right side of the lens, you see some fallen, and you see that one tree is cut down to the stump, right? And this is one person's set of lenses, and they're looking at the world through their perspective, through their, through their prescription, right? So Lisa wears glasses, I wear glasses. Lisa cannot borrow my glasses because these are my lenses, they're my prescription. Hers might be a different prescription. That's what we're talking about when we say we all have a cultural narrative. I have a narrative that I'm looking through, and you might not understand it, but I also might not understand your narrative that you're looking through. It does not mean that my narrative is wrong. It does not mean that yours is right, and vice versa. It simply means when we can say, oh, your narrative is going to be different because of your lens that you look through, then we need to understand what is it that we're seeing in each other's lenses, right? Just that's kind of the whole point of this picture. Thinking about biases, you might have a perspective about something that might not be accurate, and a bias simply is your own opinion of what was shaped in your story based on things that you've learned. Okay, so think about that the next time if you have any other glasses wearers or contact lenses, right? They're only for you. They're your narrative. They're your perspective. They're your prescription. You do not need to apologize for them. You just need to be very aware that sometimes when you look through your own prescription, it might be damaging to the other person. So just honor that, respect that, own it. Please, please, please own it. Because that's going to even allow the conversation and relationships to be that much more authentic and honest and accepted. Quickly, you've got a mirror on one side and you've got a window. Okay, when we're doing this cultural work, if you look at a mirror, you're going to see yourself. If you look through a window, you're going to see something different. And so what I want you to remember with this picture is the fact that when we are dealing with people different than us, don't look at them and expect that you're going to see your reflection. And if you are doing that, there's going to be tension, there's going to be misunderstandings happening because you're asking for your version of them. You're asking for your version to show up in them. Not a good idea. But when you look at somebody who's different than you in the context of a window, it's going to look different because you're looking outside and there's a variety of things that you're seeing. So please give people the blessing of seeing them as a window, not as a mirror. And if you are in the habit of seeing them as a mirror, think about what you need to do based on the tools that you've received through this class on how you can make the interaction more like a window, appreciating or even acknowledging what's different about them. So we're at the end here. You can go to my website, semaglobalconsulting.com, and pull these off the website. They're free handouts. Inclusion enhances belonging. And then I am not a racist. What do I do next? And if you're wondering if racists still exist, last night, so I'm a partner consultant with the company, and last night I spent 4 hours with this client teaching the workshop, and it was on building diverse community within the organization. And I am not joking, that room, Zoom room, was full of racists. And my facilitator partner and I, we had such a migraine by the time we were done because we had to do all this mental gymnastics on, they could see me on the video and I have to hide my face. I have that face disease where my face speaks before my mouth does. Right. Holy moly, it was so intense. When we were done, we just looked at each other and go, did that seriously happen? Holy cow. So on the flip side, some people aren't they aren't racist. They just don't have the tools on how to handle something, right? And so just really appreciating the fact that you might not be a racist, but what do you do next? So those are just two tools that you can go ahead to my website and pull those off. And then here are some quick little practical steps. I think you have them in your handout, so I'll just kind of fly through them real quick. You spend time learning more about yourself. Self-awareness will always be the best key to growth. Think outside of yourself, right? It's not just about what's happening in your narrative. There might be something else going on in that person's narrative. Don't acclimate to the point of losing sight of who you are. I was there 9 years into our marriage, plus 2 kids. Not cool. Don't do it. Please, learn from my mistakes. Be intentional. Be intentional with people close to you. Be intentional with strangers. Be intentional in all areas with your community. Don't just hear people that are different than you. Really listen. And remember we said silence and listen have the same letters. Stand up when you see injustice. Look beyond the skin to the heart. And then, don't be afraid to ask for help. What is it? I can't see. Okay, our hands and feet only go so far, so ask for help, right? We realize that we can only do so much, but then ask for help. Either that's through other community members or someone that might be going through some of these challenges that you're not familiar with. And so ask for help. How can you help? How can you be an ally? What can you do? And these are some great practical steps. I believe you have that as one of the handouts. I hope you do. If not, I'll be sure to try to send this to Lisa so you guys can have it. And that is all. These are my links. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Please, please, please follow us on this Instagram. I know that that's the generation. I'm looking for some new things came out that I didn't know in the meantime. But TikTok, no, it's banned in this country.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah,
It might be here
sure.
eventually.
Okay, so we're going with Insta, and then, so be sure to connect with me on the sites, and again, you can contact me through the website at humanconsulting.com, contact page if you have any questions, or if you'd like to have a little bit more dialogue, and I will do that as a blessing to all y'all, because you're working so hard, and I want to cheer for you as you deal with all the stress that you're going through. Thank you so much for allowing me this time to be with you all. Again, if any questions arise, shoot them through Lisa, and I'll be sure to answer them in due time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And now, blessings to you. You make your way home and sleep well. And say hi to Ken.
Thank you, will do. Bye, everybody.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you. Wish you the best. See you.
See ya. Okay, so before we go, this is the first of our group intercultural event things, okay? So we're gonna be going to the temple and to the mosque shortly after break, okay? In fact, I think the Tuesday after break, so I'll be sending that email out. But each of these times we do something together, you need to vlog, okay? So if you look way back at the beginning, we went through the syllabus together, and on that syllabus is all of the things that you have to do on your own, like going to the chapels, which many of you did, okay? And then there's also these times we're going out or having people in. And for all of these things, you have to do a little vlog entry. So I want you to take 5 minutes right now to, on these handouts, to write your impressions of what we just did with Kenita for the last 2 times, okay? So get out the handout, or get your computer out. That would be even smarter, okay? Get your computer out,